Can you think of an artist or a band that you would say is in a subgenre, all by themselves? A table, for one. Maybe The Doors? Well, one band, one artist I would definitely put in that category is Jethro Tull.
Sun-streaking clouds, I know now wandering lonely.
I had the opportunity to call Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull to talk about their 24th studio album, Curious Ruminant, and the third album in almost as many years.
I tend to work pretty quickly, so I think there are 3 songs on the album that I remember writing in the course of a week towards the end of the recording process, and they came very quickly, you know, both in terms of lyrics and the general essence of the music and the arrangements. So that when I've got something that makes sense, I tend to want to get on and record it, even if the other guys, in the case of some of these tracks, weren't around at the time and couldn't be available that day or that week. So I plow on by myself and get a master vocal, master flute, and some other instruments, whether it's a mandolin or acoustic guitar. You know, I get it down, I get it onto the project as a master, not as a demo, but the final recording.
So Ian Anderson is one of these artists that he goes through explosive periods of creativity. In fact, if you took a look at Jethro Tull's discography, what you see is from 1968 to 1980, they would put out 13 albums. Even through the 80s and the 90s, they were still putting out albums about every 2 to 3 years. And here most recently in the last several years, between his solo albums, projects such as the Mandoki Soulmates, and of course Jethro Tull, you can tell that once inspiration hits him, it's like an unstoppable avalanche.
I did say to the record company, well, you know, there might be another record if you want to extend the contract to embrace an option for a third album, that's okay. And they said, yes, we do. At the beginning of January, I thought, well, I'm not ready yet. I'm not really, you know, it's too soon after the one before to start thinking about being creative. But by the time May came along, I was feeling more energized to do something. And, you know, the main driving force was available time. And as soon as I started working on one of the tracks, then the rest of it started to move quite quickly. And the way in which it comes together, hopefully, is like a snowball at the top of a slope, beginning to move and gathering momentum and size and power as it goes along. And that's what the creative process is like. It's a building up of momentum, and it feels exhilarating to do that.
Now, speaking of the Mandoki Soulmates, I had commented to Ian that, you know, the growth in digital tools that are becoming available for songwriters, which I think bring a lot of benefits, but I also think they bring cause for concern at a risk of losing that organic style of songwriting. And therefore, I think his music and the music he's often associated with is more important now than ever before. And asked him how he felt about seen as a champion of a more analog approach towards songwriting, not just analog in terms of the equipment, but literally in the songwriting approach, to which his response was incredibly humble.
You were talking from the Leslie Mandoki publicity gospel here. I think he takes it all very, very seriously and always talks about everything as if it's some high art form. Well, it isn't. We're just a bunch of folks having fun. I think you can very easily take it all too seriously. It's for others and for history to decide on the relative merits of your output over the years. And sometimes, you know, you think, well, I'm just an entertainer. I'm in showbiz. Other times you do as an individual perhaps take it quite seriously and very, very proudly and in very much detail as to how the creative process develops. But publicly speaking, you know, I have to adopt the attitude that this is just, you know, an old guy having a bit of fun.
Now, in Leslie Mandoki's defense, because I've had the opportunity to talk to him a couple times, he grew up in communist Hungary. So his perception of music, the importance of music, is probably quite different from a lot of us. He has talked about how Stalin saw jazz as the music of the free mind, and you could actually get in trouble. Some of this music was seen as contraband. So keep in mind, Leslie brings that perspective to the table. Actually, to hear him talk about it's quite emotional, quite inspiring. But even Ian Anderson understands the importance of music and has an opinion on the impact that digital technology is having on the recording process?
The 60s and 70s, it went from 8-track recording in 1968 to 16-track recording the year later, and then a couple of years later we had 24 tracks to play with. But the process, in some ways, was a good one to learn because you had to make decisions as you went along. I mean, dear old George Martin had to make those decisions with only 4 tracks to record on, with albums like Sgt. Pepper, which were relatively complex recordings, but he had to make very conscious decisions to say, okay, well, this is the bass track, this is the drum track, I'm going to bounce them together, so I have bass and drums together, that's it. You can't separate them again afterwards because you've made your decision, you got to stick with it. And that's the way I apply myself today, even though I have endless tracks, possibly, that I could record on in the digital domain. I do tend to work in the analog fashion of destructive recording. So if I record on a track, I have deleted what was there before. It's gone forever. I don't want it back because it wasn't good enough. That's why I'm replacing it. And that's the way I tend to work. Most artists these days want to keep every take, and they will do endless takes, which to me seems utterly pointless because you should know you played it really well or you didn't.
Now, the prior Jethro Tull album, Rookfuta, featured a young guitarist by the name of Joe Parrish James, who also plays for a band called Albion, which, by the way, is really cool. But after touring in support of that album, Joe asked to be excused from the band and was replaced by fellow Albion bandmate Jack Clark, which Ian explained was a natural fit.
And Jack Clark, his buddy in the band they play in together, was a natural fit to step in his place. So Jack had already played bass with us when regular bass player David Goodyear was off having surgery, and at some other point, I think when he had COVID or something. So Jack had stepped in a couple of times and indeed even played guitar as opposed to bass guitar, played guitar covering all the keyboard parts when our keyboard player was away for a couple of months at the beginning of last year. So Jack knew the culture of the band, knew the way things worked, and he knew quite a bit of the set list already, albeit perhaps as a bass player or covering keyboard parts. But he stepped in and it was like a very seamless transition. Luckily Jack was well integrated into the band in time to make his contribution to the new album, Curious Ruminant, in which Jack plays, really, really well. He's a natural, sympathetic kind of a player. He understands the value of playing melodic solos, not just cramming as many notes as he possibly can into 32 bars.
Jethro Tull, a band, a subgenre unto themselves, maybe? Their 24th studio album, Curious Ruminant, comes out March 7th. The title track's already available. Be sure to give it a listen.